Hello and welcome to our Unit 6 review. This is going to be a review of Part 1. So sit back, collect your study guide, and get ready as we review this together. Remember, on this video, it's going to be key for you to use this to help you study. So if you already know number 1 as an example, skip that and move on to the ones you don't know. So let's go ahead and get started here by taking a look at number 1. And I'm going to just I think what I'm going to do is zoom in just a little bit here on my video, making it a little bit better for you to see everything. So as you look at this, we've got 18 girls and 8 boys in the classroom, and we want to write a ratio as a fraction in simplest form, then tell what type of ratio it is. So part to part, part to whole to part. If we just read those directions, we're going to get a lot of information right out of this. So I know I'm making a ratio of boys to girls. There's 18 girls and 8 boys, so that means there's 8 boys and 18 girls. So if I'm going to write that ratio as a fraction, it would be 8 boys to 18 girls. And you'll see here I'm just putting letters as my labels, which is all we really need to do. Now I want to write this in simplest form because it says it right in the directions. And on our test, I think there's going to be a separate line for this. But think about it, 8 and 18. What are some numbers that I could possibly divide those by to simplify it down? Hopefully you're thinking about the number 2. So if I take 8 divided by 2, that's 4, and 18 divided by 2, that's 9. So that'd be 4 boys and 9 girls. The type here, if I'm looking at boys and girls, that's a part of the class and a part of the class. So this is just part to part. Okay, now over here, same scenario, 18 girls, 8 boys. I want the girls to the total students. So the girls, well, that's easy, that's given to me. And then total students is going to be 18 girls plus 8 boys. So I need to add this up. 8 plus 8 is 16, 1 plus 1 is 2. That means there's 26 total students. So I'm going to write this down as a ratio here. I'm going to have 18 girls to 26 total. But I'm not done there because, of course, I need to figure out this in its least, or I guess simplest form. So hopefully you're thinking about the number 2 again. 18 divided by 2 is 9 girls, and 26 divided by 2 gives you 13 total. So that would be my simplest form there, 9 and 13. And I know that, by the way, because 13 is prime. Now look at this. I have a part of the class and all of the class. So my type here is going to be part to whole. There we go. That's pretty simple for 1 and 2. And again, those two are very, very similar to each other. The next one here, it says, for the given situation, write the ratio in all 3 ways. We need to know there are 3 ways to write this ratio. So let's look at the example. The months of the year that begin with the letter M to the total months in the year. Well, I know that there are 12 total months in the year, right? So total months, I could say it's going to be 12. The ones with an M, let me run through them here. So I have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, November, October, November, December. Did I mix those up? Why did I do that? But there's 2 M's. So that means there's 2 months with the letter M. So I'm going to write this in order, letter M to the total number. So I'm going to write it first as a fraction. That's 2 M's and 12 total. All right, next I'm going to write it with a colon. That would be 2 to 12. Next I'm going to write it with the word 2. 2 to 12. Pretty simple there. You just have to remember the 3 ways to write a ratio. Let's move on now to what I consider to be the meat of our study guide and our part 1 test, and that would be starting here with number 4. You're going to see as you flip through the pages of your study guide, there's a lot of questions on this part of our test, and luckily for us, all of them deal with ratios, so it's not like there's anything we can't handle. Take a look at number 4. It says Barb has a total of 30 pens. 18 of these are blue, and the rest are red. What's the ratio of blue pens to red pens? So I want to know blue pens to red pens. Luckily, I already know that 18 are blue. I just need to know how many are red. So I know I have 30 total, and then 18 of them are blue, so I could subtract 18 blue pens to figure out how many red pens I have. So if I do this, I have 0 minus 8, which I can't do. I have to borrow. That becomes a 2. That becomes a 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. I have 12 red pens, so I can put 12 red pens here. Now just a note here. It says, write the ratio in simplest form. And it even says it right on the directions. Right? So if I'm looking at this, that's not in simplest form. I have to think about a number that goes into 18 and that goes into 12. Let me think about this really hard. Some of you might be thinking about the number 2. If we did 2, that would reduce it down to 9 and 6. All right, so that's not quite what we're going for. What we really want is 6. Hopefully you picked up on that. All right, so I could reduce it down by just dividing them each by 6. 18 divided by 6 gives me 3. And 12 divided by 6 gives me 2. So I have 3 blue pens to 2 red pens, and that would be my final ratio. Let me go ahead and take a look at number 5. This one says Melanie's entire workout consisted of 12 minutes of the warm-up exercises, 20 minutes of weightlifting, and 13 minutes on the treadmill. What is the ratio of the number of minutes she spent on the treadmill to the total number of minutes of her entire workout? So I want the treadmill minutes. I'll just label that T. Maybe I'll say treadmill to total, because I guess T wouldn't really work. So I know the treadmill. Let me look at it. 12 for warm-up, 20 for lifting weights, 13 for the treadmill. Okay, so good. I've got the treadmill to the total number of minutes. So the total number of minutes is going to make up 12 for the warm-up. You can tell I'm doing this late at night because I'm kind of tired. All right, we got 20 minutes for lifting weights. And we have 13 minutes, of course, on the treadmill. That's her entire workout. So I need to add all this together. So 2 plus 3 is 5. 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 1 is 4. So she had 45 minutes total. That's going to go over here as 45 minutes. Now I want to reduce this down to simplest form. And luckily enough, this is in simplest form because 13 is a prime number. It doesn't have any factors other than 1 in itself. So I can't reduce that down any more than I can right there. So there's my ratio, 13 on the treadmill to 45 total. All right, if you look at the instructions here as we move on to number 6, now we're not worried about simplest form anymore. Instead, we want to answer the questions. And if we were to simplify it down, we wouldn't have an answer anymore. For all of these remaining questions on our test, it's all a matter of finding an equivalent ratio. We've done this in a couple different ways. You could find the unit rate and then multiply, and I'll show you that example here coming up. Or we could just figure out what the common number that we're going to multiply or divide by is going to be, and then multiply or divide by that number. So let me start by making my words first. So I have leaps to hours. So I'm writing this out like a ratio. Oops, there it is. Leaps to hours. Always good to be able to see it on the video, right? All right, so I know that I have 812 leaps, and I know I have 12 hours. And I also know I'm making an equivalent ratio where I'm going to have a certain number of leaps to, in this case, 3 hours. So I want to think, how do I go from 12 to 3? Since I'm going from a bigger number to a smaller number, I know that I need to divide, right? So I'm going to divide 12 by something to get 3. If I don't know what that is, I can always take 12 divided by 3. I would end up with the answer of 4. That's because 12 divided by 4 is 3. So I can divide that by 4 to get my answer of 3. That means up here I need to take 812 divided by 4 to get my answer here. I don't know what 812 divided by 4 is, so I'm going to do some math off to the side. So 4 goes into 8 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. I can subtracting it 0 and bring down my 1. 4 goes into 1 0 times. Bring down my 2. 4 goes into 12 3 times. That's 203. That's 203 leaps. So my missing number there is 203. Hopefully you're understanding why I don't simplify that down, because that really is my answer. How many leaps did the dolphin make in 3 hours? It made 203 leaps in 3 hours. All right, let's move on. Try out another one, number 7. Hermione, is that her name? Earns $4 per hour for walking a dog. How many hours must she work to earn $320? Well, let me make my ratio. This will be hours, or actually dollars, to hours. All right, so I know she makes $4 per hour. Some people get confused by this, but think about it. $4 per hour. It doesn't have a number there, but we know per hour, that's 1 hour. So if we want to know how many hours she needs to work, this is my box I'm going to fill in to earn $320, right? I want to think, well, let's see, 4 multiplied by something equals 320. Some of you might be able to do this in your head, and maybe you can't. So let me show you what you would do. You're going to take your larger number divided by your smaller number. So that's 320 divided by 4. So 4 goes into 3 0 times. 4 goes into 32. Let me think about it for a second. 8 times. 8 times 4 is 32. I could subtracting it 0, bring down my 0. 4 goes into 0 0 times. That means my answer here is 80, because 4 times 80 equals 320, and 1 times 80 equals 80. Now this one is already in unit rate form. And so for all of these, if we want to, we can solve them by just taking our first ratio. I'll look back at number 1 for a minute. Take our first ratio, just take 812 divided by 12, and that's going to give you your unit rate, your leaps per hour. If we figure out that, we can multiply it by the number of hours we need. In this case, they gave us the unit rate, $4 to 1 hour. So we knew however many times 4 went into 320 was going to be our answer for the total number of hours. All right, let's try out number 8. Now this one, it says it takes 3 hours to paint 11 cars at a factory. At this rate, how many hours will it take to paint 165 cars? So I know I have a ratio, hours to cars. Hours to cars. And I take the time to set that up every time. All right, so 3 hours to paint 11 cars. And then over here at this rate, it's going to take, I'm looking for how many hours. So I don't know the hours, but I know I want 165 cars. Okay, so if I look at this, I need to think, okay, 11 to 165, I'm multiplying by something. I just don't know what. So let me take 165 divided by 11. Now 11 goes into 16 one time, and 1 times 11 is 11. I subtract, I get 5, I bring down my 5. 11 goes into 55 5 times. That's 15. So I'm multiplying 11 times 15 to get 165. So you guessed it, I'm going to take 3 times 15 up at the top. 3 times 15, if you weren't sure, you could always do the math. I just happen to know that fact in my head because 15, 30, 45. So 3 times 15 is 45. So it takes 45 hours to paint 165 cars. Look at us rolling it along here. This is great. Let's move on now to number 9. Number 9 says, to clean a tank, 3/4 cup disinfectant is needed for every 7 gallons of water. How many cups of disinfectant are needed for 35 gallons of water? Same thing as what I did before. Let me do this. So I have 3/4 cup is needed for 7 gallons of water. So over here, I'm going to figure out my cups and my gallons. And it looks like I need to know my cups. So that's going to be my blank space. And I know already that I'm looking for 35 gallons. So I have to think, what am I doing to 7 to get to 35? It's a smaller number going to a bigger number. So I know for sure I'm multiplying by something. Some of you are probably yelling at your computer screens right now saying, I know what it is, I know what it is. And good, you should. If you're not sure, just think 35 divided by 7 is going to be your answer. That answer, by the way, is 5. So 7 times 5 is 35. That means up here I need to multiply 3/4 times 5. Now don't get scared here because we've got a fraction in what really looks like a fraction. But remember, we're looking at this as a ratio. In order to multiply 3/4 times 5, I can just multiply like I would multiply any other time when I'm multiplying fractions. So 3/4 times 5. I can look at that as 3/4 times 5 over 1. I'd look to cross simplify, but I'm not going to go too far there because I can't. So I have 3 times 5, which is 15. And then 4 times 1, which is 4. Now I have 15 over 4, but I need to figure out what that would be as a mixed number. So 4 goes into 15. Let me think about it. Let's see. 4 would be too much. That's 16. So it goes in 3 times. Okay, 3 times 4 is 12, and that will leave me with 3 left over. So I have 3/4. That's 3 3/4 cups is what I would need for the disinfectant to mix with 35 gallons of water. Do you see how all of these on this page so far have just been the same thing? We're just finding equivalent ratios. In fact, except for number 6, we are multiplying every time. I don't know if that's a trend or not, but we want to make sure that we're just setting up our ratios, making equivalent ratios, and then from there it's pretty simple math. Now here is a great example where maybe unit rates could come in handy. So let's look at it. A school earns $116 from selling 29 tickets to the choir concert. Each ticket costs the same price. How much does the school earn for one ticket? We really want to think one ticket is going to be our unit, price, or our unit rate. So whenever I hear unit price, unit rate, I always think about shopping, and when I get it down to the unit rate, I'm going to be dividing. So I take my dollars to my tickets, right? And then dollars to tickets. Up here, I know that I made $116 for 29 tickets. All right, so I want to figure out how much it costs for one ticket. Now I could figure out that 29 divided by 29 is 1 pretty easily. Hopefully you can too. That means I'm taking 116, I can't talk and write at the same time tonight, 116 divided by 29 to get my answer here. In other words, how much does it cost for one ticket? Let me go ahead and do that math here off to the side. So I have 116 divided by 29. All right, so 29 goes into 1, 0 times. 29 goes into 11, 0 times. 29 goes into 116. I don't really know this one. I guess what I'll have to do is guess and check. So I'm going to guess maybe if this number were like 25 and this number were 100, it would be 4. So I'm going to guess maybe 4. 29 times 4. 4 times 9 is 36. 4 times 2 is 8. Plus 3 is 11. That's 116. Well, I am going to have to start entering those guessing games at the carnivals because I guessed correctly there. 4 times 29 is exactly 116, which is fantastic because that's my answer. So it costs $4 for one ticket. All right, so there we go. There's an example how we're finding the unit rate right there in that problem. If they wanted to know how much, let's say, 4 tickets costs, I could have broke this down into the unit rate as I did, and then I would just figure out if one ticket is $4, I would be able to figure out what 4 tickets are by taking 4 times 4. It would be $16 for 4. All right, let's move on now, and maybe we'll get a chance to see that here soon. All right, here is Tanner on a skateboard. He skateboarded 6 miles in 3 hours. I'm going to set my ratio up. That's miles to hours. Miles to hours. At the same rate, what's the total number of miles Tanner could skateboard in 7 hours? So he went 6 miles in 3 hours, and we want to know how many miles he can go in 7 hours. Well, I want to think about this because 3 goes, divided, or 3 multiplied by something equals 7. 7 divided by 3, I'm not going to get a whole number. So this might be a good time for me to use unit rates. And I'm going to show you that example here in the video. All right, so to figure out the unit rate, I just need to divide. 6 divided by 3 is going to tell me how many miles he's able to go in 1 hour, right? So I could break this down 6 and 3, that would be miles and hours. And if I wanted to know how far he goes in 1 hour, I could divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. It might be simpler just to think 6 divided by 3, because that's really what we're doing. So this really tells us that he's going 2 miles in 1 hour. If I know he goes 2 miles in 1 hour, I can just take the number of miles that he's traveling in 1 hour and multiply it by 7 to figure out how many miles he's going to go in 7 hours. Does that make sense? So 2 times 7 is 14. So up here, I know this answer is 14. He's going 14 miles in 7 hours, and I know that because I figured out how far he goes in 1 mile, or 1 hour, sorry. All right, and I did that again by using the unit rate. If we wanted to, I could have taken 7 divided by 3. I would have gotten 2 1/3. I could have then multiplied 6 times 2 1/3 and gotten 14, and I would have had the same answer. So the way you solve this can vary. but that's just another way to do it. All right, let's take a look at another one. Here we are on number 12. A school bus travels 14 miles. Boy, my handwriting is horrible tonight. Apologies for you. 14 miles in 32 minutes. So I want to figure out at this rate, how many miles will the bus travel in 64 minutes? That's an excellent question. I'm glad they've asked me. So if I look at this, there's maybe a couple ways I could solve it. I could figure out how many miles it goes in 1 minute. It's going to be a decimal. It's going to be a fraction. It's going to be a small number, right? But if I just look at this for a minute, I have 32 here, and it's jumping up to 64. Think about that for just a quick second, and I might realize that I'm just taking this number and multiplying it by 2. 32 times 2 is 64. That means I just need to take 14 and multiply by 2. 14 times 2 is 28. You could do the math on that off to the side if you're not sure, just to double check your work. But that's our answer, 28 miles in 64 minutes. Pretty simple once you set it up as a ratio. Let's move on now to number 13. During the 5K race, the student council members served 22 gallons of water to the runners. How many cups of water did they serve? Now I want everyone to pay close attention because we know how closely the study guide is to the actual test. So if we have to know that they served 22 gallons and we don't know how many cups they served, we should probably know that there are 16 cups in 1 gallon. All right, that's just a fact to know. All right, so know that fact. If you think about the big G or you think about Gallon Man, you could figure out how many cups are in a gallon, or just remember there's 16 cups in a gallon, and that's going to serve you well. So if I know that there's 16 cups in 1 gallon, all right, and they served 22 gallons, I can make my equivalent ratio here. And I'm trying to figure out how many cups they served. Well, let's think about this. 1 had to be multiplied by something to get to 22. 1 times 22 is 22. So that means I take 16 times 22. And by golly, I don't know what that is. Let me do the math here. 16 times 22, or 22 times 16. Let's see, 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 2 is still 12, plus 1 is 13. Add my 0. For the placeholder, 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 2 is still 2. Then I add these together. 2 plus 0 is 2. 3 plus 2 is 5, and 2 plus 1 is 3. That's 352 cups. How about that? So if anybody ever asks you, how many cups are in 22 gallons? Now you know there's 352 cups. And again, we figured that out just by doing the ratios. Let's move on now to nearing the end. All right, we're on number 14 now. Evan paid $3.92 for 14 erasers. At this rate, how much would it cost Evan to buy 11 erasers? And you may hear me talking faster. That's because I'm running out of room on my memory card, which could be bad. But I set up my ratio and I take the time to do that, even though I'm running out of room on my memory card. So I know there's $3.92 for 14 erasers. All right, so I want to think about this and think about what I could do. Now I could figure out that he's buying 11 erasers, take 14, divide by something to get 11. All right, that's probably going to be a fraction, probably going to be tougher to figure out. Instead, I'm just going to go for the unit rate. I'm going to take 392 divided by 14. All right, and I think that's going to help me to find my answer. All right, so 392 divided by 14. Notice I'm not moving any decimals because there's no decimals in my divisor. Okay, so 14 goes into 32. I'm going to guess 2 times, right? 2 times 14 is 28. I could subtract. 9 minus 8 is 1. 3 minus 2 is 1. Okay, bring down my 2. And then 14 goes into 112. How many times? Whew, I am not really sure. I'm going to have to guess and check. All right, so let me guess and check right now. I'm going to guess maybe 9 times? We'll do a guess. This is not boding well for my memory card issue right here, but 4 times 9 is 36. And then 1 times 9 is 9, plus 3 gives me 12. Ooh, just a little bit too much. If I just subtract 9 from here, that's what 14 times 8 is going to be. All right, so that's still a little too much. So I think I need to go 7. I'll just double check this here. 14 times 7. 4 times 7 is 28. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 2 is 9. That's 98. I can subtract, and I'm going to run into number 15 here, so I've got to be very cautious. But this is going to give me 14 remaining. All right, I can add a 0 and bring that down. That's 0 there. And 14 goes into 140 10 times. Did we mess that up? I think we did. Okay, my apologies. That should be an 8. What was I thinking? 14 times 8. 8 times 4 is 24. 8 times 1 is 8, 9, 10. That's 104. Ah, okay. You ever have one of those days? I don't know if you have or not, but hey, good thing I guessed and checked, huh? So here I've got 112 minus 104 now. This is getting super sloppy on the video, so hopefully you can figure out what it all says if you need to. But I'm going to come up with 8 here as my answer, and then that's 80. And then 14 goes into 80. I'm going to guess it would be 5 times. But now I'm starting to doubt myself on everything here. Let me do the math off to the side. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5. Plus 2 is 7. So that's 70. So I was right. Okay. So I've really got 28.5 cents, right? So it'd be like 28.5 cents for one eraser. If I need 11 erasers, I can take 28.5 cents, or 285 hundredths of a dollar, and multiply it by 11. Now in this case, if you were to round up to 29, I think that would be fine, and that's actually what I'm going to do here. All right, we are back online, I think. Cleared a little bit of room in my memory card, and now I've got a battery issue. So this is getting ultra fun here for me, but hopefully the video caught the end of this one. I just want to wrap up number 14 quickly by saying I figured out the unit rate, in other words, the price per one eraser, and then figured out what the cost would be for 11 erasers by just multiplying. All right, moving on now to number 15. All right, Veronica types a 6-page report in 40 minutes. Each page has 320 words on it. What is Veronica's typing rate in words per minute? All right, so I have to do a little bit of converting before I can figure out the words per minute. So that's my ultimate goal. The words per minute, right? But before I can get there, I know it's a 6-page report in 40 minutes. All right, it's not pages per minute, it's words per minute. Each page had 320 words on it, okay? So if there's 320 words on each page, so on one page, I need to figure out how many words there are in 6 pages. So again, I can just set this up like a ratio like I've been doing. All right, so I'm just going to take 1 times 6. That means I take 320 times 6. So real quick, 320 times 6. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 1 is 19. That's 1,920 words in 6 pages. So if I have 1,920 words that were written in 40 minutes, now I can figure out how many words are written in 1 minute. So I'm going to take 40 and just divide it by 40 to get to 1 minute, and 1,940 or 20 divided by 40 to figure out my words. So let me do that. 1,920 divided by 40. Let's see, 40 goes into 1 0 times, goes into 2, or 19 0 times, 192. Let me think about this for a second. I'm going to guess here, because I have to guess and check. So I would guess maybe it's going to go in like 4 times. Let's try it out. 40 times 4. 4 times 0 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 160. And I think that's probably a good guess. So I have 4, I have 160. I can subtract I have 2, I have 3, I have 0. So look at that. That's a good guess. Now I've got 320. All right, 320. If I think about this, that's just double this, right? So I can guess 8 here. And then 8 times 40, double 160 is going to be 320. So on the nose, that's 48 words in 1 minute. So there we have it. Now number 15, for the first time really in this test, we're seeing an example where we have to convert first before we can answer the question. A lot of people are going to be tempted to just take, the 6 pages in 40 minutes, and they're going to take 320 in 40 minutes. It's not the same. It's actually 1,920 words in 40 minutes. All right, moving on now to our last one. Yeah, I think that's right. That's our last one on part 1, and then we'll move on to part 2 with a second video. So a chef makes 5 containers of soup that fill a total of 100 soup bowls. Each container of soup costs $6 to make. What's the cost per bowl of soup? So here we have to find the total cost per container. All right, so it costs $6 for 1 container. And I want to figure out the cost of 5 containers. And you might say, why is that? Well, because I have 5 containers that fill 100 bowls of soup. All right, so I'm just multiplying here by 5. So 6 times 5 is 30. That means it costs $30 for all 5 containers that make 100 bowls of soup. So now I can figure out the cost per bowl of soup. Okay, so the cost per bowl. So I know that 100 bowls, that's how much I have in 5 containers, by the way, 100 bowls, that costs $30 because I figured that out up here. So I want to know the cost now for just 1 bowl. That means I'm dividing by 100. And if you know about dividing by tens or 100 or 1,000, you're just moving your decimal point over the same number of zeros. So I move it over once, twice, and I would get 30 cents or 30 hundredths of a dollar. So 30 cents per bowl. A little bit of conversion there to do first, and then we're well on our way. And again, it all starts and ends with ratios. That's the focus of this test. So as you review this portion of the study guide, again, I'd like to think that if you know how to set up your ratios and you know you're making equivalent ratios every time, you can either use unit rates, you can multiply or divide to figure out what you're multiplying or dividing by to come up with the same numbers. All right, so that's part 1 of our study guide, and that's really what part 1 of our test will look like as well. I encourage you to watch this video as often as you need to, review it as often as you need to help yourself prepare